Hello, and welcome to Math Made Easy with Mr. S. Today we're going to be talking about multiplying and dividing integers. Okay, some important terms we need to know though before we start talking about how to multiply and divide integers. Most important is what an integer is. So if we're going to be multiplying and dividing them, we should probably know what we're talking about. So the definition of an integer is just any positive or negative whole number. Okay, so there's no fractions, there's no decimals, but there's positives and there's negatives of whole numbers. That's the definition of what an integer is. So that's what we're going to be multiplying and dividing today. And to go with integers is the idea of something called absolute value. Hey, absolute value just means a number's distance from zero. So for example, when you see something that looks like this, okay, these two up and down lines here are the absolute value sign. So this problem right here, this equation right here, is asking you, or saying that the absolute value of 5 is 5. Because an absolute value is just the distance from 0. So when it asks you what's the absolute value of 5, the answer is 5 because it's 5 spaces away from 0. Okay, same thing happens when it wants the absolute value of negative 5. Okay, so these straight up and down lines mean absolute value. So when they ask you what is the absolute value of negative 5, it is still 5 because negative 5 is also 5 spaces away from 0. So what we need to remember is when you're working with signed numbers, the number represents the distance. Okay, so the number represents the absolute value, the distance from 0. The sign represents what direction it goes in when you're working with integers and signed numbers. So positive means we're moving right. So for example, when we see the number positive 8, the 8 means we're moving 8 spaces. The positive means we're going to the right 8 spaces. Okay, that's what positive 8 means. Starting at 0, you're 8 spaces to the right. That's positive 8. Okay, on the other side of that, a negative means we're moving left. So when we have the number negative 8, that means starting at 0, we are going to move 8 spaces, but the negative means you're going 8 spaces to the left. That's what a negative 8 means when we're talking about signed numbers, talking about integers. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today, like I said, is we're going to talk about how to multiply and divide integers. Okay, if you watch my video on adding and subtracting integers, we're going to kind of do the same thing we did with that. We're just going to look at some examples and kind of come up with an easy way or some rules to multiply and divide integers. So the first example I want to put up here is an answer we already know the answer to, or a problem we already know the answer to. We should know that 2 times 3 equals 6. Okay, you learned that way back when. The reason 2 times 3 is 6 is you learned that all multiplication is repeated addition. So 2 times 3 just means to do 2 plus 2 plus 2. So 2 added 3 times. That's what 2 times 3 means. 2 plus 2 plus 2. That's where the 6 comes from. And that's why 2 times 3 is 6. So if we put a negative sign in here and do negative 2 times 3, it's the same idea, but instead of 2 plus 2 plus 2, now we're looking at negative 2 plus negative 2 plus negative 2. Because now we're doing a negative 2 3 times. And if you watch my adding integers video, if you haven't, go back and double check that if you're not sure how to add integers together. But a negative 2 plus a negative 2 plus a negative 2, when you add those together, same signs, you add the numbers, keep the sign. So a negative 2 times 3 would be negative 6. Okay, negative 2 plus negative 2 plus negative 2. Well, if they're both negative, negative 2 times negative 3, we're still going to do negative 2 3 times. Okay, so it's still negative 2 plus negative 2 plus negative 2 to give us negative 6. However, on this example, there is an extra negative sign that we haven't used yet. Okay, we used the negatives for negative 2 3 times, but we still have this negative sign over here that we need to use. So that negative sign is going to carry over to our answer. So we actually have a negative negative 6. Okay, and when we learned about adding integers, or when you learn about integers, you learn that a negative negative turns positive. Okay, so negative 2 times negative 3 is actually going to give us positive 6. Because again, it's negative 2 plus negative 2 plus negative 2 is negative 6. Bringing this extra negative over, a negative negative means positive 6. Okay, so those are some examples that are going to help us come up with the rules to multiplying and dividing integers. So the first rule we want to know is if we have the same signs, our answer is always positive. Okay, so what I mean by that is when you're multiplying two numbers together, whether it's a positive times a positive, like the first example. Okay, when we did positive 2 times positive 3, we got positive 6. But that's also the rule if you do a negative times a negative. Okay, negative 2 times negative 3 would be positive 6. Because when you multiply or divide integers, if the signs are the same, whether they're both positive or both negative, your answer is always a positive number. Okay, rule number 2 is if the signs are different. Okay, so if one's positive, one's negative, you're always going to get a negative answer. Because when you do a negative times a positive, you're just doing a negative number that many times. And a negative plus a negative, no matter how many times you add it together, is always going to be a negative number. So when you multiply and divide, same signs positive, different signs negative are the rules we want to follow. Okay, so here's some examples just to kind of re-emphasize that rule. So when I look at 5 times negative 10, first thing I look at is I see that these two signs are different. Positive 5 times negative 10. Signs are different. One's positive, one's negative. That means my answer is negative. Then I just do 5 times 10. So I just end up with negative 50. Okay, different signs, negative. Okay, this one, I'm doing negative 9 times negative 7. First thing I look at is same signs means positive answer. So I know it's positive, and 9 times 7 is 63. So negative 9 times negative 7 would be a positive 63. And it's the same exact rules when we divide. So when I look at this problem, I have negative 81 divided by positive 9. One's negative, one's positive. We have different signs. So it's a negative answer, and 81 divided by 9 is 9. So negative 81 divided by positive 9 would be negative 9, because signs are different. Negative answer when we divide, just like with multiplication. And then the next one, negative 35 divided by negative 7. Same signs mean positive answer. And 35 divided by 7 is 5, so negative 35 divided by negative 7 is a positive 5. Okay. Same signs positive, different signs negative when you multiply or divide. Which leads me to one last example, which is a little bit tougher. Now we're going to multiply three numbers together. Okay, this is negative 2 times positive 3 times negative 5. And just like when you multiply when they're all positive, you can only multiply two numbers together at a time. So that's the same thing we're going to do on this type of problem. If I'm going to multiply three numbers together, I'm just going to start with two numbers and multiply those at a time. So I can start with negative 2 times positive 3. Okay, and like what we just talked about, negative 2 times positive 3, well, I know 2 times 3 is 6, but since I have one negative and one positive, I have different signs. Those two multiplied together give me negative 6, and then I just bring my negative 5 down. So I do negative 6 times negative 5, same signs, positive. 6 times 5 is 30. So when I multiply negative 2 times 3 times negative 5, my final answer would be positive 30. Okay, so that's one way we can do it. Just multiply negative 2 times 3 to get negative 6, then do negative 6 times negative 5 to get 30. But we don't have to do it that way. We could start by multiplying the negatives together. Okay, negative times negative, same signs, positive. So negative 2 times negative 5 would be a positive 10. I'd bring my 3 down. So I'd have positive 10 times positive 3, same signs, positive answer. 10 times 3 is 30. Okay, so it doesn't matter what two numbers you multiply together first, but you multiply two numbers at a time, then multiply by the third one on a 3-number problem. Okay, so that's multiplying and dividing integers as quickly as I can show it to you. And the main thing to remember is same signs positive, different signs negative when you multiply or divide. Okay, and don't give up. If it's confusing you, go back, rewatch the video. If it didn't make sense because you haven't seen the adding integers video, go back and watch the adding integers video. But the key is don't give up. Keep trying, keep working till you figure it out. Okay, if you find this video valuable, please like, subscribe, share, comment. Let's make math easy for everyone. So please, again, like, subscribe, share, comment. Let me know what else you want to see, what you're interested in learning, so that I can make a video to help you out. And as always, have a great day and be good to each other. Thank you.